Breakfast and brilliant ideas, coffee and conversation, we're serving up that and much more at IBJ Media's events. Join us at an upcoming event and kickstart your day with fresh ideas and new connections. Check out our event lineup and register now at ibj.com/RSVP.
There is a regulatory framework that we should have with AI. Honestly, though, the regulators can't keep up with the technology either, which is why I think my view is a sandbox approach is a pretty good starting point for how we address it.
Hi, I'm Jayson Manship, host of Authentic and Agentic, presented by TechPoint. Every week on this show, we break down what's happening in AI and what it means for how we work, lead, and live. Join me for a human-focused conversation that keeps you ahead of the curve. This is the Authentic and Agentic podcast on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. Hi, friends. Welcome to the Authentic and Agentic podcast. I'm your host, Jayson Manship. A few weeks ago, we did a show about the ethics of AI. Last week, we interviewed some global leaders using AI to cure disease. And this week, we're going to talk to a congressional leader on AI issues going through Congress. And I want to be very clear at the outset here. This is not a political podcast. This interview is about the intersection of tech and politics. I have a long history in the tech and politics space. I've had the chance to watch firsthand how the sausage is made. And in my experience, early in this, the tech leaders were avoiding DC. They weren't choosing to engage. They kind of had this mentality or this approach that they were going to stay out in Mountain View or Silicon Valley, Palo Alto. But now you're seeing them engage a lot more. And sometimes, as we're going to talk about here shortly, they don't have a choice. They're being called in to testify or to discuss some of these hard issues. So I think this episode is a really hard one. This podcast is intentionally about the hard things. I really am actively trying to find stories like this, conversations like this that we need to be engaging in. And I think it's important that we have these hard conversations. Tech is always going to move faster than legislation, always. And so the tech groups are moving quick and the legislators are trying to figure out what to do. So for me, when we talk about legislating this stuff, we really just need to be we really need to be talking about guardrails. Guardrails is the starting point. Like building a way in which they can operate inside of, I think is really important, and making sure that, it's not left unchecked, because that can become really problematic. And so every week on this show, we do a news segment where I talk about what's happening in the world of AI. There's always a lot happening. But for this week, I want to keep it focused on this crossroads of politics and technology. So my first story is about this interview Mark Zuckerberg did last week. He was called into court in LA. The plaintiffs were brought him in, and they were arguing that not enough is being done to verify the age on Instagram. 13 years old. You have to be 13 to use Instagram. And these folks are saying, like, you're not doing enough to actually make sure these people are 13. The attorneys argued about the addictive nature of these platforms, how social media is increasing mental health issues and depression and suicide. Hard conversations for sure. And we are going to get into more of this with Congresswoman Houchin, but this is a hot button topic. And personally, in light of the recent abduction and death of a teen woman in our own hometown, I, as a parent, would like stronger guardrails for kids and young adults. And we, as parents, need to be talking to our kids about these hard issues. You're going to hear us mention this in the interview, but if you are a parent and you haven't read the book, The Anxious Generation, please do. It has been instrumental in how Amanda and I are dealing with these issues in our household. And I think it's something that we have to be talking about with our kids and with other parents. My second story today stays here at the heart of tech and politics. I just read this, that the CEO of Anthropic is being called in to the Pentagon to have a heart-to-heart with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. It's being described as a standoff. Doesn't sound like it's very amicable. But Anthropic is being asked to remove some safeguards from their product, Claude. So the Pentagon uses Claude, and the Defense Secretary is saying, hey, we need you to remove some of these built-in safeguards so that we can, have more power, more opportunity, more functionality with your software, with your LLM. And from what I've read, Anthropic seems to be willing to loosen some of its existing usage restrictions, but they've said flat out, like, there's two areas we're not gonna take out, right? One is the mass surveillance of Americans, using their technology to surveil on Americans. and 2, the development of any weapons that could fire without human involvement. Both seem reasonable to me, but obviously I don't have all the facts and figures here. So it's an interesting conversation. And to me, the real question is, who should have control over this technology? This is a big tech versus big government showdown. I believe ultimate power ultimately corrupts. Pause for a second and think about this. Can you safely say that a politician wouldn't use power to maintain power? Or that a company wouldn't use power to build a monopoly, or a company might not sell it to the wrong guys if the price is right? These are hard problems to consider. And I'm going to be watching this pretty closely to see how it plays out. But, big stuff here. My final piece is on energy and energy costs. So here in Indiana, depending on where you're getting your news or where you're getting your facts from, I've seen that energy bills have gone up in the last year somewhere between 7 and 18%. And frankly, as someone who owns 2 electric vehicles, I know we're putting more strain on the electric grid. I switched to LED bulbs, but now I have 2 cars that plug in and charge every night. And so, I use these AI tools every day. I'm for sure using more compute power than I ever have. And I think there's a real battle happening here. To keep up, to win this AI race that we're going to talk about here shortly, we need more power. We have to find other ways to generate power, things like solar and nuclear. We need more data centers. We need more battery storage. Now, understandably, people don't want these things in their backyards, which I totally understand. I wouldn't want one in my backyard. But if we are trying to win the AI race, we have to solve these hard problems. If we want to level up ourselves and our businesses, these data centers, these power plants, these solar farms, they have to go somewhere. And I'm going to go on the record now and maybe this is a bold prediction, but I think it's going to be forced onto small communities from the top. I've watched this play out. Politics takes time. There was a bill introduced in the Indiana Senate recently that was suggesting that the state government could take away local ordinances, could overwrite local ordinances. It was killed ultimately because the local folks don't want this, but pressure is building. And at some point, I think the president or Congress or the governor is going to say, you don't get a choice, dear local community. This is going to happen to you. Now, no one wants a landfill near them, but we have to put our trash somewhere. No one wants a data center near them, but if we want the data, if we want the power and the compute, we have to put it somewhere. And so to me, it's wild that billion-dollar decisions, some of these data centers are multiple billions of dollars, economic development for their communities. Now, there's a deeper conversation there on what actually filters out, et cetera. But in some of the conversations I've seen and been a part of, this is like millions of dollars in contributions to local schools, local safety, police and fire. And sometimes these decisions are made at the county or community level where it's 3 commissioners making a decision, and there were a few thousand total votes to those commissioners to get in there. I think that this is going to play out in a very weird way. Think about this for a second. You have trillion-dollar companies, literally trillion-dollar companies trying to win this AI race, and their $5 billion data center is being blocked by 3 local elected officials that maybe took 4,500 votes to get elected. I just don't see this. If I don't know how this plays out, but I can't imagine that there's a clean solution here. Just look at both sides of that and think about that for a second. For me, if I were an elected official in my community, I would be trying to find a way to build some reasonable rules and requirements so that I have a voice in this impending decision. I think at some point I'm going to get these officials are going to get, I use the term voluntold. It's going to happen to you, right? And you're going to get what you get and not throw a fit, as I tell my kids. And so I'd be trying to find ways to think through this and build something that protects my community and, get something for us out of it if we're going to do these sorts of things. But this is coming. This is absolutely coming, and we're going to see how it plays out. So I've seen scenarios like this where adding a solar farm or a data center could have generated, like I said, millions of dollars, and they're just killed outright without any serious consideration. And guys, I think this is going to be a conversation over the next couple of years as this continues to play out across the country. So that's it for the news this week. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back with our interview with Congresswoman Erin Houchin. AI isn't just changing jobs, it's changing who gets hired. TechPoint's new brief, AI Amplifies the Need to Address the Experience Gap, shows how AI is changing entry-level jobs and how employers can take advantage of this moment. Download the brief and find out ways to get involved at techpoint.org/AI Gap. Welcome back, and thanks again to TechPoint for sponsoring this podcast to help us have some of these hard conversations. Like I said at the outset of this episode, this is a pretty heavy episode. We're going to talk about a lot of things for kids' safety, for energy challenges we're facing, for national security stuff. There's a lot going on here. But before we get into our interview, I do want to share one behind-the-scenes tidbit. This isn't something you normally talk about, but when you're preparing a podcast like this, you do your research, right? You go spend your time trying to find a guest, understand what is important to them, understand what fits for you guys, my listeners. And so normally when you have a high-profile guest like a congressperson, you're going to have a pre-call with their staff. You're going to say, hey, I'd love to have her on. Here's what I'd like to do. What does it look like? And make sure that you're, aligned on kind of the vision of the episode, understanding kind of what works and what doesn't. And so here's what I loved about this episode and specifically, and about Congresswoman Houchin specifically. I asked her staff, we got through it. I said, what's off limits? What do I need to avoid? What out there do I need to not bring up, right? She's an elected member of Congress. So politics is a real thing. You and I can all agree with that. Whether you agree with her politics or not, you can agree with that. And so normally when I've dealt with members of Congress, they have a very strong list of things you don't talk about. And what I loved about it was her staff said, nothing's off limits. You can ask her anything. What? Congresswoman Houchin is fearless, guys. She genuinely wants to lean in and take on the hard issues. And regardless of your politics, she's exactly the kind of person you want representing you. We need leaders on both sides of an issue pushing to find the best solution. It takes that level of effort, that pressure, that push. And I am just really grateful for the Congresswoman, for her staff, for Chris at the IBJ, for helping make this interview happen there at the IBJ headquarters. Congresswoman Houchin is a star. She's going to do big things. She's already doing big things. And I'm just really grateful that she sat down with us to have this hard conversation about AI. So let's get to it.
Congresswoman Houchin, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I am really excited to talk to you. You have been a leader in a lot of ways for the state of Indiana, but at a national level also.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here. Jayson, it's great to see you again. Love that you're covering these topics on your podcast. These are important discussions that we should be having, and I'm just grateful to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I was looking at, you're on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and I was looking at the latest batch of bills that you pushed up to full committee. Looked like there were 18 or 19 bills. 4 of those it looked like you were connected to around AI-specific stuff. So I saw the AWARE Act, the Safe Bots Act, the Reset Act, and the Parents Over Platforms Act. Can you tell my listeners what those are and maybe kind of lean into that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we recently had a subcommittee hearing where we had 18 bills marked up and moved to the full committee, and I was proud to be part of and author 4 of those bills out of that package. And I come to this issue mostly as a parent of used to be teenagers. Now my youngest is 16, almost 17, but I had to go through this social media, AI development as a parent of teenagers. And that gave me a perspective that I felt was important to weigh in legislatively. We have seen the AI chatbots directed at children in ways that, and even some adults, where these chatbots can become dangerous if the person on the other end of the chatbot believes they're talking to a real person, or believes that's relational or familial or a doctor or a therapist. And so we wanted to, with the AWARE Act, educate parents, teachers, work with stakeholders to put out some materials about what an unsafe chatbot might look like, and warnings for parents on how their children may or may not be interacting with those. There are some that have legitimate educational purposes, but some are dangerous. So we wanted to have a clear delineation of those things. But then the Safe Bots Act, it has some limitations and some regulation on how children can interact with AI chatbots, including time limits and notifications that it's not a companion, it's not a friend, it's not a relationship.
But that's
it's not
really
a doctor.
important because they're getting better and better. And when I talk to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or these tools, it feels like I'm talking to a human.
Right. And some people will refer to the AI chat bots that they're talking to as he.
Sure.
I'm not sure why they chose male pronouns, but they refer to it as he.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit concerning, right? Because you're not talking to a human being.
Yeah.
But we have seen children interact with these that unfortunately have turned to suicide because some of the chatbots have encouraged, unregulated, have encouraged self-harm. So part of the platform is requiring that if you're going to have a chatbot, if the user starts to discuss self-harm, they will be directed either to a real person or resources. And even adults, we're going to require interruptions in their conversations to say, hey, FYI, I'm an AI. I'm not a real person. And if you are on, some of these chat bots currently and you're having those interactions, you will probably see, depending on some of the things that you might ask about, if you're asking for a cocktail recipe, you might see, here's some resources or confirm your age. So we are slowly seeing some improvements, but we want to have some guardrails around it, which is why I did the first two bills, Safe Bots and the Aware Act.
Okay.
The second two bills, that is the Reset Act and Parents Over Platforms. I came to this issue, as I said, as a parent. When my daughter was 13, she got Instagram, figured out how to hack around our parental controls.
Sure, they're smart.
We discovered over the summer that she was staying up all night on her phone. Even though we thought she was locked down, she wasn't. And she was messaging who she thought were 13 and 14-year-old boys and girls all over the world. When we discovered it, really just because of changes in behavior, I contacted the Instagram and said, I would like to delete her account. And they said, under the law, she's 13. She's legally allowed to have it. And as her parent, you cannot have a say.
Wow.
If she would like to delete the account, she can. So that left me as a parent with a complete inability to protect her. Because even if I took away every device, if she went to school, or a friend's house, she's going to be able to log in on somebody else's device. Now the students are even able to use VPN technology to hack through the software on their laptops for school. All kinds of nefarious things they're able to do and figure out because they're way better at technology than we are. Maybe not you, but me. But that's terrifying as a parent to think that, they can be 13. Well, this goes back all the way back to 1996.
Okay.
And I don't want to tell you what I was doing in 1996 because that will reveal my age. But it's a long time ago, Jayson. And back in 1996, Congress passed the Kids Online Privacy Protection Act, which said 13-year-olds can have access to the internet. We had no idea 30 years ago that where the internet would be today, social media apps, having the internet in the palm of your hand. We didn't know any of those things. Congress at the time thought 13-year-olds might need access to the internet to do their homework and do research.
Which made sense at the time.
Mm-hmm. But we're 30 years in. Yeah. And we know the dangers. We've seen the dangers that a 13-year-old standard for access to the internet essentially makes them an adult online. So they're not adults anywhere else.
They can't sign a contract. They can't join the military. They can't smoke a cigarette or drink a beer.
But they can access the World Wide Web.
Which can be just as damaging as all of those things.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And we would never just give our kids, especially under 13, just free reign in today's society. Mm-mm. But we let them go everywhere around the world online and have access to untold things that we may or may not want them to have access to. So the Reset Act, we worked with Jake Auchincloss on Parents Over Platforms, which sets a 16-year-old standard there for access to the App Store. Ours is 16 for access to social media applications with age verification. And it's really important. Even at 16, if we set the standard at 16 and your child is 15 or 16 and they get into negative behavior as a result of access and interaction with social media, even if we set the standard at 16, they're still going to be able to do what my 13-year-old was able to do, and we may or may not be able to control that. But at least a child is more mature.
Yeah.
We know that 15-year-old boys are the most likely to commit suicide based on their interactions with social media platforms. So the idea that even today there are bills out there that are being championed, that Instagram is advertising that,
Sure.
oh, we won't let kids under 13 have access to Instagram. They already don't let children under 13 have access to Instagram, but there's no age verification.
Well, they're trying to codify that age.
They want to codify 13.
Yeah.
So when folks brought the idea to me to sponsor a bill that sets the age limit at 13 in 2026, 30 years after COPPA, I looked at that and said, there's no way we can do that.
We've learned some things since
We might have learned
1996.
something since then, and we should have a standard of at least 16. And so I have been fighting vigorously to help my colleagues in the House understand on both sides of the aisle the importance for a 16-year-old standard. I've had too many parents come in my office in Washington and contact the office and visit us in the district to say, to tell us about tragic things that have happened to their kids because of interactions with these platforms. And parents today, despite some arguments where people say, well, the parents should control this, we are totally outmatched with the technology. We have the complete inability to protect our kids without a bill like the Reset Act.
My wife and I struggle with this. I think any parent listening to this with kids in that age bracket are feeling this. Yeah. The pressure is to give me a phone and let me go do my thing, right? We are the worst parents in the world right now because our 10 and 12-year-old don't have cell phones yet.
Well, don't give it to them.
Well, I read a book called The Anxious
Take it from here. Oh, so The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt, we actually worked with him and his team on crafting the Reset Act as well, modeled after some of the bills that they had championed in other countries, which are way ahead of the United States on protecting children from internet harms.
Yeah, I tell my kids, I'm willing to be the worst dad in the world if it protects you. So it's really my job, I think, as a parent. And so thank you for fighting that battle. I think that's really important. So thanks for sharing those things. And let me maybe change gears a little bit. So you personally are one of the younger members of Congress. I assume that means, I don't know, right? But you probably use AI some.
I do.
Okay. What about, are the younger members of Congress, are all members of Congress, are staffers? I just have to assume, I spent a lot of time in D.C., but this was pre-AI. This was social media. And y'all are trying to do a lot. And this is the productivity platform of tomorrow, so I have to imagine it's being used.
Yeah, so I will say first, yes, I have used AI as a member of Congress, even sitting in committee. It is a very useful tool to fact-check Democrats, for instance, when they're making wild claims. I can input those to the chat and see what truth there is to what they're saying and be able to use that in real time to formulate better arguments, to push back on some of the things that maybe are less than true.
Sure.
Maybe would earn some Pinocchios.
Sure.
And other ways you might have an idea for even legislation and ask a question about how this might work. What are the concerns that I might need to think about just to help you think through something?
Yeah.
I would say staffers are probably using it to write letters to
all of
folks
them.
and all of them,
Yeah.
about 99. I don't know, my staff, you might not want to use ChatGPT or others to write your memos to me. But I'm sure that it's being heavily used throughout DC. I'm not sure that older members are using it, but it certainly has been useful just as to help you think through things. I think mostly as we're approaching policy work, it is like the internet, scraping it in a second and giving you an answer, which is pretty remarkable. And we know that there is a regulatory framework that we should have with AI. I was part of the AI working group for financial services, trying to figure out how it's being used in the financial services sector and if we should put guardrails, what those should be, how much do regulators know about how it's working and how it's being used. So we're having these conversations. There's an AI
Good.
task force. Honestly, though, the regulators can't keep up with
No.
the technology
Nope.
either, which is why I think my view is a sandbox approach is a pretty good starting point for how we address it. If you want to put something in a sandbox and let the AI, sort of be tested out before it's ready for prime time in a regulated industry like financial services,
Sure.
for instance, that makes sense to me. You're not stifling innovation, but you're providing some safety for consumers in the process. And those conversations are ongoing.
I think that's great. I last week had a chance to interview the chief technology officer and the chief AI officer for Eli Lilly. That's one of the most regulated businesses probably on the globe. And
Yes.
literally. And they have been thinking about this for years and years and years. And so I was pretty astonished at how they have tackled these problems. And it started with executive sponsorship and education. And one of the things they have, which I loved, was because they're a scientific company, they think about stuff scientifically. Like, let's fail, let's experiment, let's test, let's not just
Try.
turn on and let people figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of wisdom in that discussion. And I think you're thinking about it the right way.
Yeah, and with Eli Lilly, there's such a leader in their craft and global leader, not just in the United States but around the world. And we're so proud to have Eli Lilly headquartered in Indianapolis. We have long thought that um, utilizing, let's say, an electronic medical record through the VA or through DoD, Department of War, you could pull down data from that to find something as simple as what is the best blood pressure medicine to treat this age, this BMI, this condition, and make healthcare much more efficient
And affordable.
and fine tune. So the sky's the limit on what we're able to do. Productivity is off the charts. These companies that are investing in data centers it's skyrocketing the amount of productivity that individual businesses can achieve, as just because they're sort of implementing some of these functions that AI's been around a lot longer than we think it has. We've been using it for longer than we think, and most
ChatGPT
people
came out, and we kind of think of that as AI.
as the entrance to that.
That's
but
right.
but it's been around longer than that. The algorithms have been used longer than that. But the the idea that, some people are on Google, for instance, and they do a search and they don't even realize that they're using Gemini. It's that streamlined into our day-to-day
That's
lives.
real. That's absolutely right. Well, one of the things that came up in the conversation with the leaders at Lilly was thinking about the global space race, as they called it, about AI. So we've got China, Russia, the US, and we're all trying to be the leaders in AI. Even inside of just the United States. I mean, you've got all the tech companies kind of fighting over who's going to be the winner, so to speak. As a member of Congress, I mean, protecting our borders, protecting our country, building safeguards, like, how are you thinking about some of this stuff? I mean, I have to imagine that AI is part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, man, how do we even, set America up to win this battle?
Well, we have lots of battles on several different fronts. One of them is the race to have a stable coin and do, cryptocurrency legislation, do that ahead of what some of our competitors are trying to do. The other piece of this is AI, and data centers play a part in that. We have to have adequate energy supply to do it, which is why when data centers pop up, you might see a substation pop up as well. So I am focused on trying to streamline, fast track the development of small modular nuclear reactors.
Okay.
We are working on a pilot project, hopefully getting us an SMR placed within Indiana at Crane Naval Base.
Okay.
That is what we're hoping for. If we can perfect it at Crane, working with Secretary of Energy Susie Dravorowski, trying to make that the model, that is it's the cleanest energy,
Sure.
the most efficient energy. That's going to reduce the energy drain on the grid that will be necessary to do next gen AI and fund these data centers. That's, I think, going to be the most critical piece is we're competing with China, who has no regard for clean energy. They'll produce whatever energy they can get, and they'll do it like gangbusters because they're intent on beating us to this quote unquote space race.
Yeah.
We have the same issue with cryptocurrency. We have the same issue with critical minerals. All of these things, though, I've been so pleased to see President Trump and his administration focused on. His cabinet leaders are focused on what I think is exactly the right things. Let's get critical minerals back to the United States. Let's figure out this digital currency, the stable coin. Let's not have a stable coin that's not backed by the U.S. dollar nation, around the globe.
Yeah.
And let's figure this out, this energy portfolio with nuclear reactors. And they're not the nuclear reactors of days past. SMRs, small modular nuclear reactors, are just like that. They're similar technology is on all of our submarines. So it's not unsafe as maybe some of the reputation of nuclear energy has had in the past.
Sure. How do you see President Trump, or maybe he asks you guys to help in your districts, how do you see selling that to the constituents? One of the things I see here in Indiana is every time a data center pops up, every time a solar farm pops up, we haven't seen nuclear yet to my knowledge, but as soon as those start popping up, there is a community concern, right? And you've always done an awesome job of representing your community. How do we think about that stuff?
Well, we've seen that when you see data centers go in. I think that the companies that are fueling the data centers, they could go a long way in the PR campaign by funding the substation and not putting it back on the rest of ratepayers. I think that is one thing that the industry could do to get that NIMBY problem taken care of.
My energy's going to go up.
Right. And we did see our energy rates go up down in southern Indiana. Now, you could say it's coincidental to the data center that we got in southern Indiana, but the rates did go up. So it is a concern. I think taking slower steps, but trying to fine tune it at a place that's contained, like a military base, may give people more comfort in that. I also, interestingly, I shouldn't. My staff's probably going to be like, "What are you doing?" We're about to go viral. But there is the ability to crowdsource, and I know this because I asked ChatGPT.
Sure.
You can crowdsource CPU.
Okay.
So it is possible, although nobody's doing it. I think there's one company that has looked into the possibility. But if I have unused CPU on my home computer, you could feed that to the quote unquote grid, just like we do solar for the energy grid. And you could utilize that, which is crowdsourced, which means that the energy requirements are much less because it's spread over a larger area and not confined to one data center. So there are additional, I think, improvements in technology that will not take away the need for data centers. You're still going to need a place to collate all of the CPU and make sure it's pushed out. But the technology is available, I think, to reduce the energy need while we're also still ramping up for things like digital current or stable coin and AI.
Yeah, I think it's you have the unenviable task of solving the hardest problems.
Well, it's a good thing I like to solve problems, Jayson. Ask my staff.
Well, thank you for
You should ask them how many projects I have them working on.
Well, that's why they need AI to help manage all of that.
All the special projects I give them.
That's really funny.
Somebody brings a problem to me. I'm like, I think I'll work on solving that.
Sounds like a great idea. We'll jump on that.
What's next week?
Well, let me ask you maybe one kind of personal question for me. So I spent 15 years out in D.C. I was out there in the early 2000s. And at the time, social media was just kind of tipping, right? Dating myself. And it was really funny because I got to know the two representatives for Facebook. They had a Democrat representative and a Republican representative. And I knew them both. And they told me, Mark Zuckerberg's never going to come out to D.C. home bases, Palo Alto. We're here to teach members of Congress and their staffs how to use Facebook. That was really their goal.
Oh, how times have changed.
Right? And that's kind of what I want to unpack a little bit. Now I turn on the news and I see Zuckerberg having lunch in the garden or whatever at the White House, right?
Yes.
And so a lot of these tech folks, I think, have understood now that the circle of power is in D.C. and not in Silicon Valley.
I think they learned that when they got their hands slapped after the free speech discussions when they got brought before Congress, and they realized that this was serious. That their I hate to say, but their stock could be at risk because of the threat to free speech and how people felt like they were being silenced, and then that turns out they were at the encouragement of Biden's FBI. So this is all part of I think deserved consternation from the American people about their role. But now I think seeing more of their representatives in D.C. Not only helps us, I think you mentioned helping members of Congress learn how to use Facebook.
Yeah.
I think now it's more of helping members of Congress understand how the technology works, can be used, pros and cons. We have many stakeholders that come to see us because I can't be an expert in everything.
For sure.
I have a healthcare roundtable. It's doctors and hospitals and pharmacists and you name it from around the state. We meet quarterly and they inform me on healthcare policy because I cannot be an expert on everything. So that does happen, and I think it's welcomed.
Sure.
I will say I was at the White House having a meeting. We met with the president on the reconciliation bill. I'm on the budget committee, so we had a very long 4-hour meeting at the White House with the president on budget reconciliation for the Working Families Tax Cuts Act. This was well before July 4th of last year. And he met with us for maybe 45 minutes or an hour and then said, you guys figure this out. And he went to the Oval Office, and we were in the cabinet room, and it did take us quite a while. But about halfway through our meeting, he comes back in with Mark Zuckerberg and said, I want you to meet my friend Mark. That's how close relationally, the relationships have been built with the White House, with the president himself, between these tech CEOs. And, Elon Musk himself used a lot of technology to do the Department of Government Efficiency and find a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse that we are now being able to turn back into things like budget deficit reduction.
Yeah, and I think that in any business, solving for how to leverage these tools to get to the bottom line and efficiency. Let me ask final question. I might have said that last time, but this is the actual
this is
final question.
So this is the real this is the final.
And here's what it triggered it is I think about your district. You represent a big part of Southern Indiana. I ask a lot of folks on this podcast, what's your biggest fear when it comes to AI? So I'm going to give you a second to think about that because that's ultimately going to be the question.
Oh, I can answer it right now.
Okay, well, let me tell you why I think mine maybe fits. I look at districts in our school systems that are using AI in real time and learning how to grow and do things, right? And then I look at school districts that don't even have broadband internet. And I think we're creating this bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots. And that is a big fear for me because I think there are people that are getting set up for success and people that aren't. And let me tell you the reason behind it. I interviewed the leaders of an organization at Notre Dame called the Institute for Ethics and the Common Good. These folks are studying AI ethics. They just got a $50 million grant to study AI ethics. And in doing so, they interview a lot of folks in Silicon Valley. And when they did that, the builders of social media platforms blocked their own kids from using social media platforms. So the people that were making Instagram and Facebook said, kids, you can't use this tool. But the people making Grok and ChatGPT and Gemini are encouraging their kids to use these tools because it's seen as a productivity booster. And they're leaning in early and they're leaning in hard because it helps them get where they see their vision going. And so that's, for me, the thing. I'd love to hear what keeps you up at night.
Well, I think about the last episode of Silicon Valley. If you've never watched Silicon Valley, that's, they killed their own, sorry, spoiler alert. They killed their own technology because they were afraid of what it would do. And so you have those sort of science fiction concerns.
Sure.
But realistically, I think I'm with you on this, the haves and have-nots, which is why I was so concerned when I was a state legislator. My district was the most unserved of the state for broadband access. And I could see this play out very, very clearly, that there was the divide that was growing. You have communities in the southern part of the state that cannot even access the internet. Those students, healthcare, business, you name it, we all have to be connected now. Yeah. And so we vigorously fought and got into law the what now is the Next Level Connections program, which has connected many Indiana families in rural parts of the state that never would have had access if we had to wait on, the companies to get there first without a public investment. There's an ad that used to be running, which it has two groups of students with a curtain in the middle, and they are asked the same questions, and they get points based on how quickly each team can find the answer. To your point about them encouraging their kids to use AI. So one side is as fast as you can imagine, and the other side, by the time they've answered the question, they haven't even started looking in the encyclopedias that they've been presented with on the table to find the answer. One side has the internet, the other side has a
book,
like a set of encyclopedias. Sure. So after the internet team wins, obviously, they remove the curtain and they realize that they have had an unfair advantage, or they've been cheated because they had the encyclopedias, and that takes a really long time. We're at that point with AI. So if you don't have access to the internet, if you don't have access to necessary power, whatever it is, there are factors that will create this divide. And we have to be cognizant of that. We cannot let any groups sort of fall farther and farther behind. We want equality of opportunity, not equality. We don't need equality of outcome. Sure. We don't need to level the playing field and say, you get exactly what somebody else gets, but the opportunities should be there so that everybody can compete in the global economy. And that is a fear that educationally, healthcare, business-wise, there are parts of the country that could be left behind on this issue.
Yeah, I agree with that. Congresswoman Erin Houchin, thank you so much for joining me today. I really love your wisdom on these topics. It's clear that you're schooled up and skilled on this stuff. I can only imagine what it's like to try to solve every problem in the world, and I'm sure your staff is busy. But I love the idea of bringing people together, having these conversations, and leaning in. And that to me gives me hope, right? I call myself an AI optimist. I think a lot of people are scared about the Terminator thing, right? But I think if we're willing to roll up our sleeves and have the hard conversations around the dinner table and bet on people like you who are going to go in there and fight the hard fights and solve the hard problems, I think the future's bright. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and I really appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Cheers. Thanks again to Congresswoman Houchin for being willing to have the hard conversations and for leaning in Congress. These are hard issues, but I think we have to have these conversations. And I guess as I play back the tapes and listen to our conversation, a few things that really stuck with me. One, I couldn't be more supportive. I'm super supportive of this 16-year-old concept of restricting social media to 16-year-olds and not 13-year-olds. That COPPA bill was 1996. Think about how much you've learned about technology, the internet, et cetera, since 1996. It's a different world. We now have science. We now have mental health. Like, we have these issues that we understand better and have seen what has happened. And I think just keeping it at 13 to me doesn't make any sense. Now, I get the idea of free speech. I'm all for free speech. And so if that's the guardrail or the kind of tent pole that we're wanting to hang on here, like, let them have it because it's free speech. Okay. But we don't let anyone under 16 smoke or drink or drive or vote or join the military or sign a contract. Why should we let them have access to tools that the science tells us they're not ready for? They're not developed. They don't know how to handle this stuff. I think it is a very, very real challenge, and I am super supportive of this. You are going to see a bill coming out here shortly inside of the Indiana State House pushing this same narrative, 16-year-olds for social media. Now,
probably the thing I might change to this is it shouldn't just be social media. To me, AI fits into this conversation exactly. I mean, if you're, and I'm grateful for the Congresswoman for pushing that into her bill as well at the national level, because I think that, just having access to a tool like ChatGPT, I mean, as a 13-year-old, they don't know if it's a person or not a person or what it's saying. I mean, they're building relationships and bonds with these things, not healthy at all. And we can't wait 30 years to figure this out. And so I think we've learned our lessons from social media, and I'm hopeful that we apply the same guardrails and principles to AI. One other thing I wanted to comment on, interesting take from the Congresswoman on the shared GPUs. I think that could actually happen. Now, we're away from it, right? And so if you've been around technology for long, you understand peer-to-peer and torrents and some of those things. But I remember way back in the day, there was this thing called SETI at Home, which was a desktop application you would install. And when your screensaver kicked on, it would use dormant CPU cycles on your computer to go out and analyze audio files to try to search for extraterrestrial life, which is kind of funny in hindsight. But I don't know how all this scales with real-time access, with network speeds. I mean, GPUs being more powerful, storage being cheaper. But as this stuff continues to get cheaper and faster, I think it could actually happen. I think there is a real chance that, some of this data center need could diminish. But I mean, again, we're a ways out from that. And I think the conversation now is, how do we win this space race? And how do we do it reasonably and effectively without blowing up all of our local communities in the process? So I guess one thing I want to leave you with, this is the takeaway from this. If you are a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle and you're curious, I said it at the beginning, I would strongly recommend you read The Anxious Generation. This book is, in my opinion, the book on understanding the mental health crisis that we have, on understanding what social media can do to the next generation, to the anxious generation. And I think it's really, really important that each and every one of us take this stuff seriously, and I would challenge you to read that book. Next week, I'm going to show you how I personally build with AI. It's not going to be an interview. It's just going to be me. But I'm going to discuss my favorite tools, how I use them, and what I've learned along the way. I recently built my own AI employees. I am starting to automate most parts of my life, at least in the workspace. And I would love to show you what I've learned and how I've done it. And so tune in next week for a deeper dive on the tools I use and how I use them. Till next week. Cheers.
Off the Record with Indiana's 250 most influential business and community leaders is a podcast that peels back the curtain on Indiana's most respected leaders, one episode at a time. Go beyond the headlines and hear the stories of grit and innovation that shape these leaders. If you want to know who's driving our state forward, this is a must listen. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts or at ibjpodcast.com.
The IBJ Media Podcast Network is the soundtrack of a growing state. Indiana is on the move, and you can hear it happening on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. We bring you the voices at the center of our economy, our courts, our companies, and our communities. Subscribe now and be part of the conversation that's building Indiana's future. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcasts.com.